Welcome to question 51 of the Secunda Secundae. The topic for this lecture is the potential parts of prudence, and I am Dr. Thibault. When we're looking at the parts of prudence, we are looking at, we've looked at the integral parts of prudence already, which as St. Thomas pointed out, like pieces of the house, the walls, the floor, the roof, they construct what prudence is. Then we looked at the subjective parts of prudence, which are like the species of prudence. So military prudence and domestic prudence, political prudence, regnative prudence. These are like species like lion and ox are species of the animal kingdom. So these are parts in that regard. Now we're looking at the potential parts of prudence. Now these are these features that build up. When we look at potential parts, potential means something different with Aquinas than it does by our kind of common parlance. We think of potential as things of having the capacity of. So I have the potential to gain weight. I have the potential to go to the gym. I have the capacity to do this. That's what we typically think of with potential, but this is not what St. Thomas means by potential. By potential is that potentia. It's strength, right? It's power. It is potent, right? Think of, you normally drink Schweppes, ginger ale, something like that, and then all of a sudden you have some of that natural ginger ale, that stuff that they make that's natural, and all of a sudden you drink it. That's potent, right? It's strong, right? This is what we mean by potential parts of prudence. They are the power, they support, they hold up prudence. So this is important to know the language. When we look at the potential parts of virtues, some of this slide is from back in slide 48, repeated, as St. Thomas introduced them, all these ideas in a generalized way back in question 48. We have Euboulia from the Greek. These are all Greek terms, which deals with good counsel. Now, St. Thomas back in 48 kind of called it good counsel. Here we're going to really flush that out because that can be misunderstood. We sometimes might misunderstand what's meant by good counsel. You might just think it means like just having good advice. But it's a little bit more than that. Synesis is the judgment which occurs in ordinary occurrences, ordinary judgments, and Gnome or Gnome is in cases of exception. Now this little chart above me can be a little bit useful, right? You can, well, they translate the Greek, but they also give you somewhat an explanation. When we look at Euboulia, well, it's not just good counsel. It's having a disposition to take good counsel. That's the important part. Are you properly disposed to receive it? That's that kind of virtue in here. The good counsel itself, we see a bit in the next question, question 52, which is counsel as a gift of the Holy Spirit. So if God is, the Holy Spirit is giving you the gift of good counsel, are you able to be disposed to receive the gift? The virtue is that you are disposed to receive it. A virtuous person takes good counsel and things which are directed to the end of virtue, right? So again, this is part of the means, right? This is a way in order to have that good end. right? Is to follow a counsel, direct somebody, the map that directs you to your end, right? You say, well, I know where I'm going, I just don't know how to get there. That's good counsel. That's the good counsel you get to get there in terms of moral matters. Uh, it's also absent in sinners because it is contrary to taking good counsel. If one were to take good counsel, one would not be sinning. Right? A good counsel is leading one to one's proper ends. So if you are on your way to your proper ends, then you're not sinning. So an interesting point. That was the response to objection 3. That caveat was put in there. Euboulia is a special virtue now. All these 3 parts are special virtues. This is the only one that gets its own question, its own article dedicated to it. But Eubulia is not prudence itself, but finding right means for an end is very close to prudence. Right? You can probably see that. Right? Prudence is that virtue which helps direct people to their proper end. Right? Well, that's very similar to good counsel. Right? Good counsel also directs you to uh, your end, but it takes. This is not directing you to your end um, directly, right? In some sense, it's a proximate end rather than an ultimate end with Eubolia. It's directing you along the steps of the way. You still need good judgment and and command in order to actually get on the journey. This, in some sense, is the map. It's the GPS which directs you to your journey. You then have to choose to follow it, and then you have to get in the car and drive, right? So this is a very similar to virtue, right? It tells you how to get to that end, but it's not full action in and of itself. It's only a step along the way. Right? The end of good counsel is discovery of what has been done and the end of judgment. Right? So now, if we look to the next step, synesis. The good judgment is more perfect than counsel. Right? The question is synesis a virtue? Well, St. Thomas says, well, if good counsel is a virtue, then synesis is even better because uh, it's a step along the way, right? In terms of getting to where you want to go. Okay, you have the map. That's great. Are you going to follow the map? Once you've decided, yes, I'm going to follow the map, that's even further along, right? It is even better as command, right? But it's a step along the path, so it is also a virtue. Uh, Synesis is right judgment in practical matters. This is dealing with judgment in action in real ways. Right? We're dealing with real ways here, not in hypotheticals. We're not doing this uh, in an abstract way of universals, but in a practical, moral sense. And Synesis deals with common sense. That perhaps is a term that's not used in the same way as St. Thomas meant it, but he meant it as the sense in which most people have, the sense of the common people. Um, and so in ordinary matters that ordinary people are dealing with on an ordinary basis, what is the proper sense? What is the proper synesis, proper judgment in those situations? Uh, this is very practical things. This is what you're dealing with 99% of the time is this judgment in terms of ordinary daily activities. A person with good counsel can make good arguments, but synesis is necessary for good judgments. That's an important point. Um, there are people who can talk a big game, right? They know everything about everything, but they do nothing. Right? That's a bit of the somebody knows something, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can do it, right? This is part of that kind of Aristotelian approach, one that you would see with an AA program, for example. Somebody can know what's not good for them, but until they make a judgment that they're going to make it, that they're going to stop, then the knowledge is useless. This is kind of the Platonist versus the Aristotelian issue. Right? The Platonists believe if you know what the right thing is, you'll do it. Well, you need that Aristotelian element of making a judgment to say, yeah, I know what the right thing is, and now I'm going to do it. This is Synesis, right? The choosing to do it, that judgment. Then there's still the command, right? You still need to then do it. That's probably the hardest part, is the command part. But the judgment part is necessary, a necessary step to get there. Not just about knowledge, but making a decision. Synesis is about the means to moral good and not an end in itself. Command is still needed, as I pointed out. The means to get there. Have the map and you decide you're going to go. And this is part of the means to get to where you want to go. It's a decision. You still need action. You still need to get there. Just get in the car and put your foot on the gas. Now, when we look at Gnome or Gnome, this is similar to Synesis. This is a judgment, right? The same as the previous issue, except it's dealing with exceptional cases, right? Very rare cases when there should be an exception to the rule. So wisdom considers, some great lines, wisdom considers higher matters than does science. Wisdom considers higher matters than does science. Divine providence is higher than seminal forces. St. Thomas's example here is animals who have a monstrous birth, is what he calls. So, according to seminal powers, the power of the seed, otherwise we can might call it ordinary genetics, right? Everyday genetics. You know, when a woman is pregnant, you expect that the child will be a boy or a girl. You expect them to have 2 legs and 2 arms, 2 hands, 10 fingers, 2 ears, right? There's certain things we expect when a person is pregnant, a human person is pregnant. These are the ordinary course of things, right? This is the ordinary course of generation. But there are people who are not born in a typical way. You know, there are people born with bodily defects, monstrous births, as St. Thomas calls. You know, and these people, it's they didn't understand genetics the way we understand it today. But St. Thomas said that it's part of that divine providence, right? Everything naturally should have just occurred as it always does. But what monstrous births in some ways have some element of divine providence. There's something has interfered with, something has reached into nature and has turned it into something higher. That's St. Thomas's example. Now, likewise, that's just as an example. Likewise, as human beings with rationality, we should do something. We have a similar approach. So, divine providence alone considers all things that may happen besides the common course, yet he who is most discerning can judge a greater number of things by reason of Gnome. So, divine providence considers the hunchback. Divine providence considers unusual things that are not ordinary, by the ordinary course of generation. Well, we can look at this for everything else. The example that's frequently given would be, we drive the speed limit and by the traffic laws. Why? Because those laws are aimed at keeping each other safe. But if, let's say, there was an emergency, somebody's been injured in some way, they're bleeding out, they're going to die, you may go above the speed limit, you may break the normal conventions, because the purpose of those laws were to keep people safe. If you were to go the speed limit, somebody would not be kept safe, the person who's bleeding to death in your car. So therefore, to keep the principle, you can exclude the common natural law, the natural everyday laws of traffic, in order to respond to the higher principle. As St. Thomas says, divine providence considers all things that might happen, not just the common course. It doesn't mean that one should drive recklessly, flying through a red light that on a busy road you could die that way. It doesn't serve any purpose. But maybe if it's towards the middle of the night, nobody else is on the road, and you can check, make sure nobody's coming, you could go through the red light. That would make sense under Gnome. So these are principles which often come up in, sometimes they're even used now in legal writing, right? When a law could be used to create an inequality, you need prudence. You need to use Gnome to know when to make an exception to the law. The law for the law's sake is not always good. Sometimes law for law's sake will create an injustice. Prudence is needed to guide justice in the right direction. That's why prudence is the queen of all virtues, because it's needed for the proper guidance of all the other virtues. Just on itself, it is not virtuous. Right? Justice completely blindly can create injustice unless prudence is used to guide it. Gnome says, judge on higher principles than the common law. So in conclusion, a pretty short section, only 4 articles. We're looking at the ability, the disposition to have good counsel, follow good counsel. We have practice of judgment in the proper course. The 3 stages are good counsel, judgment, and then command. So we're looking at the first 2 here. Judgment in terms of ordinary course of life, right? The everyday things. And then we also looked at Gnome, when exceptions should be made to general rules because there are higher principles that affect it. Okay, so that is it for question 51.